The first gunshot rang through the crisp morning air as Sophia Kent's wedding dress caught on a rusty nail at the church entrance, tearing the delicate lace her mother had spent months sewing by candlelight. It seemed a fitting omen for what everyone in Cottonwood Springs, Colorado already knew: marrying Jackson Abernathy was the biggest mistake of her life. It was 1878, and the American frontier was unforgiving to those who couldn't stand their ground. Jackson Abernathy had plenty of ground to stand on a prosperous cattle ranch, stretching across 500 acres of prime Colorado territory, but not a gentle bone in his body, according to town gossip. His face, weathered by sun and hardship, rarely showed anything resembling a smile. His reputation preceded him in every saloon and general store, from Cottonwood Springs to Denver. "You could still run," whispered Sophia's best friend, Eliza Morrison, adjusting the torn fabric at the chapel door. "Nobody would blame you." Sophia's hazel eyes darted to the wooden doors of the small church where everyone in town had gathered not to celebrate, but to witness what they considered the beginning of her demise. "I made my choice," Sophia replied, her voice steadier than her heart. At 22, she had few options in a town where unmarried women were viewed with suspicion or pity. When they entered the chapel, Sophia felt the weight of judgmental stares. Mayor Thompson's wife leaned toward Mrs. Roberts, the banker's wife, whispering something that made both women cover their mouths to suppress laughter. Near the front pew, old Mrs. Hanson made the sign of the cross, as though witnessing not a wedding, but a funeral. Jackson stood at the altar, tall and imposing in a black suit that looked uncomfortable on his muscular frame. His dark brown hair was slicked back, revealing a thin scar that ran from his temple to his jaw, a souvenir from a cattle rustler's knife, or so people said. His penetrating blue eyes met hers, revealing nothing of his thoughts. When the preacher asked if anyone objected to this union, the silence in the church felt deliberate, as though everyone was holding their breath, waiting for someone brave enough to state the obvious. No one did. "I now pronounce you man and wife," the preacher finally announced, his voice echoing in the silent chapel. There was no cheering, no rice throwing, no celebratory gunshots fired into the air, as was customary in Cottonwood Springs. Just silence, followed by reluctant, obligatory congratulations. At the small reception held at the town hall, Sophia overheard snippets of conversation not meant for her ears. "Poor girl won't last 6 months with that devil. Heard he shot a man in Dodge City just for looking at him wrong. Reckon she's only after his money and land." That last comment stung more than Sophia wanted to admit. She hadn't married Jackson for his wealth. Truth was, after her father's death left her and her mother destitute, with the bank threatening to take their small house, Jackson's proposal had seemed like divine intervention. Not romantic, not loving, practical. He needed a woman to maintain his household. She needed security. It was a transaction dressed as matrimony. What the townsfolk didn't know, what Sophia herself had only glimpsed, were the rare moments when Jackson's hard exterior cracked just enough to reveal something more beneath the surface. Like when he'd gently helped her mother into the wagon after she'd twisted her ankle, or how he'd built a special shelf in his home for Sophia's beloved books before she moved in, though he himself rarely read anything besides cattle prices and newspapers. As the strained celebration wound down, Jackson approached her, offering his arm with formal stiffness. "Time to go home, Mrs. Abernathy," he said, his voice low and private. The way he said home made Sophia wonder if perhaps she hadn't made such a terrible mistake after all. The Abernathy Ranch lay 5 miles outside town, a sprawling property dominated by a 2-story house built of solid timber. It wasn't the grandest home in the county, but it was well constructed, with glass windows and a proper stone chimney, luxuries on the frontier. Behind the main house stood a bunkhouse for the ranch hands, a large barn, and several corrals where horses and cattle were kept when not on the range. Jackson helped Sophia down from the wagon with unexpected gentleness, his calloused hands strong yet careful at her waist. "This is your home now," he said simply, before carrying her trunk inside. The interior was Spartan but clean, with solid wooden furniture and a few unexpected touches. A rocking chair by the fireplace, curtains at the windows, a bookshelf with more volumes than Sophia would have expected. Someone, Jackson himself, had placed a vase of wildflowers on the kitchen table. Your room is upstairs, Jackson said, carrying her trunk up the stairs. First door on the right. My room? Sophia questioned, confused. But I thought, mine's across the hall, he interrupted, not meeting her eyes. You'll have your privacy. This wasn't what she'd expected from marriage, even one as pragmatic as theirs. Jackson, she began hesitantly, I understood the terms of our arrangement. I'm prepared to be a proper wife, in all aspects. His jaw tightened. I don't take what isn't freely given, he said gruffly. You barely know me. I won't demand that until you're ready, if you're ever ready. With that, he left her alone in a room that had been prepared with unexpected thoughtfulness, a quilted bed with fresh linens, a small writing desk beneath the window, a wardrobe with a mirror. That night, lying alone in her new bed, Sophia wondered about the man sleeping across the hall, the harsh cowboy with the unexpected sense of honor. The following weeks were an adjustment for both of them. Jackson rose before dawn each day, working alongside his ranch hands until dusk. Sophia took charge of the household, cooking, cleaning, and learning the rhythm of ranch life. They existed in parallel, speaking little beyond necessary communications about meals and household matters. One evening, as Sophia was preparing dinner, she heard shouting from the yard. Through the window, she saw Jackson confronting one of his ranch hands, a burly man named Pete, whom Sophia had always found unsettling. You're fired, Jackson's voice carried clearly. Pack your things and be gone before sunset. Over a damn horse? Pete spat back. You're getting soft, Abernathy. Is it because of that pretty little wife you got now? Jackson's voice dropped too low for Sophia to hear his response, but whatever he said made Pete's face pale. The man backed away, then skulked toward the bunkhouse. Later, when Jackson came in for dinner, Sophia hesitantly asked about the confrontation. Pete was mistreating the horses, Jackson said, washing his hands at the basin. I don't tolerate cruelty to animals on my ranch. The other men say you're the harshest boss in the county, Sophia remarked, before she could stop herself. Jackson paused, water dripping from his hands. There's a difference between being harsh and being cruel. I expect honest work for honest pay. I don't expect men to break themselves for my benefit, and I don't allow mistreatment of things weaker than ourselves. He dried his hands on a towel. People confuse harshness with cruelty too often. It was the most he'd spoken at once since their marriage. Sophia nodded, thoughtful. I think I understand the difference. His eyes met hers briefly. I think you might. That night, for the first time, they sat by the fire after dinner. Jackson whittled a small piece of wood while Sophia read from one of her books. The silence between them felt less like a wall and more like a shared space. Would you read aloud? Jackson asked suddenly, startling her. You want me to read to you? He kept his eyes on his whittling. I like the sound of your voice, and I never had much schooling. Reading doesn't come easy to me. So Sophia began reading from The Three Musketeers, her voice filling the room as darkness gathered outside. When she glanced up once, she caught Jackson watching her with an expression she couldn't quite name, something softer than his usual stoicism. On Sundays, they traveled into town for church, enduring the stares and whispers. Sophia held her head high, though she noticed how the townspeople kept their distance from Jackson, treating him with a mixture of fear and reluctant respect. After church one Sunday, as they were preparing to leave, Mayor Thompson approached them, his wife hovering nearby. Abernathy, the mayor said, nodding stiffly. Mrs. Abernathy, surprising to see you're still adjusting to married life. The implication was clear. They'd expected the marriage to fail already. Sophia felt Jackson tense beside her. We're managing just fine, Mayor Thompson, Sophia replied pleasantly. Jackson has been a considerate husband. The skepticism on the mayor's face was plain, but before he could respond, Jackson placed his hand at the small of Sophia's back, the first public display of affection he'd shown. My wife and I should be heading home, he said firmly. Good day, Mayor. In the wagon on the way home, Sophia finally asked the question that had been bothering her for weeks. Why do they hate you so much? What did you do to earn such a reputation? Jackson was silent for so long that Sophia thought he wouldn't answer. Finally, he sighed. When I first came here 10 years ago, I was angry at the world. My parents died of cholera when I was 16. My sister followed a year later. I fought in the war, saw things no man should see. By the time I reached Colorado, I was bitter and quick-tempered. He adjusted the reins in his hands. I won my first parcel of land in a poker game from a man named Richard Thompson, the mayor's brother. He claimed I cheated. We fought. I won. He left town in disgrace, and his brother made sure everyone knew me as the violent cheat who drove him away. Jackson's mouth twisted. The truth didn't matter much by then. First impressions stick. And the other stories about shooting a man in Dodge City? Jackson actually laughed a short, rusty sound. I've never even been to Dodge City. As spring turned to summer, the awkward politeness between Jackson and Sophia gradually evolved into something resembling companionship. He taught her to ride properly, not side saddle as she'd been raised, but astride like a rancher's wife needed to ride. She taught him his letters more thoroughly, spending evenings at the kitchen table with primer books she'd borrowed from the school teacher. In July, during a particularly hot spell, Jackson took her to a secluded spot on the property, a small, clear pond fed by a mountain spring, shaded by cottonwood trees. "The men don't come here," he told her. "It's just for the family. My father brought me here when I was a boy, during the few years we lived in this territory. When I finally earned enough to buy this land, this pond was what I remembered." The admission of sentimentality surprised her. "It's beautiful," she said sincerely, watching dragonflies skim the water's surface. "You can swim if you want," he said, turning his back to give her privacy. "I'll keep watch." The idea of submerging herself in the cool water was too tempting to resist in the summer heat. Sophia removed her outer clothes, keeping her chemise on for modesty, and waded in. The water was perfect cool without being cold, clear enough to see the sandy bottom. "This is wonderful," she called to Jackson, who sat with his back to the pond, his rifle across his knees. "Glad you like it," he replied, not turning around. When she emerged, dripping and refreshed, Jackson handed her a towel without looking. His consideration touched her. He could have taken advantage of the situation, as would have been his right as her husband, but he respected her privacy instead. As she dressed behind a tree, Sophia realized something had changed. She was no longer afraid of Jackson Abernathy. In fact, she was beginning to care for him. The change in their relationship did not go unnoticed during their Sunday visits to town. People observed how Jackson actually smiled occasionally, now brief, rare expressions that transformed his face. They noticed how Sophia would touch his arm when speaking to him, and how his eyes followed her when she moved away. "Never thought I'd see the day," Sophia overheard Mrs. Roberts say to another woman outside the general store. "Abernathy looking at a woman like she hung the moon. Still, it won't last. Men like him don't change their nature." Sophia wanted to defend him, to explain that his nature wasn't what everyone thought, but she held her tongue. Let them think what they would. That night, as they sat by the fire, Jackson finished the carving he'd been working on for weeks, a small, delicate hummingbird rendered with surprising artistry. "It's for you," he said gruffly, holding it out to her. "Saw you watching them at the honeysuckle bushes." Sophia took the carving, running her finger over the detailed wings. "It's beautiful, Jackson. I didn't know you were so talented." He shrugged, uncomfortable with praise. "My father taught me, said idle hands led to trouble." "Thank you," she said sincerely. Then, gathering her courage, she leaned forward and kissed his cheek, their first real physical contact beyond helping hands. Jackson froze, then slowly turned to face her. His blue eyes, usually guarded, were open with vulnerability. "Sophia," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "I'm not a good man, not the kind of husband you deserve." "I disagree," she replied steadily. "You're a better man than you believe yourself to be. Better than this town believes." He shook his head. "You don't know all I've done." "Then tell me," she challenged. "Tell me the worst of it, and let me judge for myself." So he did. He told her about the men he'd fought, the mistakes he'd made, the reputation he'd earned partly through his own actions and partly through gossip. He spoke of dark moments after the war, when he'd drunk too much and raged against a world that had taken everything from him. He admitted to the hardness he'd cultivated as protection. When he finished, they sat in silence, the fire crackling between them. "Thank you for your honesty," Sophia finally said. "But nothing you've told me changes what I've seen with my own eyes these past months. You're harsh, yes. Uncompromising when it comes to your principles, but you're also fair. kind to those who deserve kindness, gentle when it matters. She reached out, placing her hand over his. I didn't expect to feel this way when we married, but Jackson, I care for you. Deeply. The vulnerability in his expression nearly broke her heart. He turned his hand to clasp hers. I never thought anyone would look at me the way you're looking at me now, he admitted, especially not someone like you. That night, when Sophia retired to her room, her door remained slightly ajar in invitation. After a long moment, she heard Jackson's footsteps pause outside, then continue to his own room. She understood. He was giving her time, making sure this was truly what she wanted. In August, tragedy struck the neighboring Taylor Ranch when a fire broke out in their barn during a summer storm. Jackson organized his men immediately, riding through the night to help fight the blaze. When he returned the next morning, exhausted and smoke-stained, he brought news that the Taylors had lost their barn and most of their hay stores for winter. We need to help them, he told Sophia. William Taylor has 5 children to feed and no way to keep his stock alive through winter without hay. Of course, Sophia agreed. What can we do? Jackson ran a hand through his sooty hair. I'm going to send half our hay stores and 3 of our hands to help rebuild their barn. Sophia was momentarily stunned. Half our hay? Won't that leave us short for winter? We'll manage, Jackson said firmly. We can rotate the herd through the south pastures longer. The Taylors have young children, Sophia. They won't survive the winter without help. So it was decided. For the next 2 weeks, Jackson and his most skilled men helped the Taylors rebuild, while Sophia organized the women of neighboring ranches to provide meals and supplies. What surprised her most was how readily Jackson's ranch hands followed him in this effort, working extra hours without complaint. Mr. Abernathy's always been fair to us, explained Thomas, the oldest of the hands, when Sophia commented on their dedication. Pays better than most, doesn't ask what we can't give. When he says a thing needs doing, we know it's important. It was during this time that Sophia first noticed the change in how some of the townsfolk regarded Jackson. The local newspaper ran a small piece about the ranchers helping the Taylor family, mentioning Jackson by name. At church the following Sunday, William Taylor publicly thanked him, his voice breaking with emotion. The night after the Taylor barn was completed, Jackson came to Sophia's door. This time, when he hesitated, she opened it fully. "May I come in?" he asked, his voice low. She nodded, heart racing. He entered but remained standing just inside the doorway, as though afraid to presume. "I'm proud to be your wife, Jackson Abernathy," Sophia said, finding courage she didn't know she possessed. "And I would be honored if you would be my husband in truth tonight." He crossed the room in 2 strides, taking her face gently between his calloused hands. "I've loved you since the moment you started reading to me by firelight," he confessed. "I never thought you could love someone like me." "I do," she whispered. "I love you, Jackson." Their first kiss was tender, almost reverential, before deepening into something more passionate. That night their marriage was truly consummated, not as the business arrangement it had begun as, but as a union between 2 people who had found unexpected love. As summer faded into fall, Sophia and Jackson settled into a rhythm of life that felt natural and right. They still maintained separate bedrooms. Jackson insisted Sophia should always have her own space, but most nights they shared one bed or the other. Sophia took a more active role in the ranch operations, learning about cattle management and helping with the accounts. Jackson continued his evening reading lessons, progressing to the point where he could read simple stories on his own. In October, Sophia realized she was with child. When she told Jackson, he stared at her in wonder before dropping to his knees before her chair, placing his hand gently on her still flat stomach. "A baby," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Our baby." "Are you happy?" she asked, though his expression had already answered. "Happier than I've ever been," he replied honestly. "Happier than I deserve to be." "You deserve every happiness," she insisted, pulling him up to kiss him. "And so much more." The news of Sophia's pregnancy spread through Cottonwood Springs, eliciting mixed reactions. Some expressed genuine congratulations. Others seemed surprised the marriage had lasted long enough to produce a child. A few openly wagered on whether Jackson would make a decent father. "Pay them no mind," Sophia told her husband, when she saw his jaw clench at some overheard comment outside the general store. They don't know you as I do. It's not me I'm worried about, Jackson replied. It's you and the baby. I don't want our child growing up hearing whispers about their father. Then we'll change those whispers, Sophia said with determination. One day at a time. That winter was unusually harsh, with heavy snowfalls isolating the ranch for weeks at a time. Jackson worked tirelessly to ensure the cattle had access to feed and water, often returning to the house half frozen. Sophia, now showing her pregnancy, worried constantly about him pushing himself too hard. In January, during a brief thaw that made travel possible, Dr. Miller visited the ranch to check on Sophia's progress. After pronouncing both mother and child healthy, the doctor accepted a cup of coffee in the kitchen. "You know, Abernathy," he said conversationally, "I've delivered babies in this county for 30 years, seen all kinds of fathers-to-be, the nervous ones, the proud ones, the ones who can't wait to get back to work." He paused, studying Jackson over his coffee cup. "Don't think I've ever seen a man look at his wife the way you look at yours, like she's something precious." Jackson, unused to such direct personal comments, shifted uncomfortably. "She is," he said simply. Dr. Miller nodded. "Good, that's good." He drained his cup and stood. "Town's starting to notice, you know. You're not exactly the man they thought you were." After the doctor left, Sophia wrapped her arms around her husband from behind, pressing her cheek against his back. "See, I told you we could change their minds." Jackson turned in her embrace, placing a gentle hand on her rounded belly. "I don't care what the town thinks," he said honestly. "Only what you think." "I think I'm the luckiest woman in Colorado Territory," she replied, standing on tiptoe to kiss him. February brought more snow and an unexpected visitor. Sheriff Davies rode up one afternoon, his horse struggling through the deep drifts. Jackson welcomed him into the house, where Sophia provided hot coffee. "Not a social call, I'm afraid," the sheriff said grimly. "Got word from the marshal in Denver. Pete Donovan's been released from prison. Word is he's headed this way, making threats against you, Abernathy." Jackson's expression hardened. "Pete worked for me 2 years ago. I fired him for cruelty to the stock, then caught him trying to steal one of my horses on his way out. Testified at his trial. Well, he served his time, but apparently he's been telling anyone who will listen that he's coming to settle the score." The sheriff looked uncomfortable. "Thought you should know, especially with Mrs. Abernathy in her condition." After the sheriff departed, Sophia found Jackson checking his rifle in his study. "How dangerous is this man?" she asked directly. Jackson sighed. "Pete's mean, but not particularly smart. Still, a stupid man with a grudge can be dangerous. I'll alert the hands, double the watches." He set the rifle down to take her hands. "Don't worry, I won't let anything happen to you or our child." For the next week, Jackson was vigilant. Never going far from the house, stationing men around the property. The strain began to show in the tightness around his eyes, the tension in his shoulders. One night, Sophia awoke to find his side of the bed empty. She found him at the window, scanning the moonlit snow. "Come back to bed," she urged. "You need to rest." "I keep thinking about what I'd do if he—" Jackson broke off, shaking his head. "I've known men like Pete. They don't let go of grudges." "We can't live in fear," Sophia said firmly. "Whatever comes, we'll face it together." March arrived with the first signs of spring melting snow, longer days, and the promise of new life. Sophia's time was drawing near, and Jackson became increasingly protective, rarely letting her out of his sight. It was during the mud season, when melting snow turned the roads to treacherous slop, that Pete Donovan finally made his appearance. Jackson was in the barn with two of his hands when a shot rang out, splintering the wood near his head. "Abernathy!" a voice bellowed from outside. "Come out and face me, you son of a bitch!" Jackson signaled his men to stay down, then called back, "Pete, this is between you and me. Let's talk about this reasonably." "Reasonable!" Pete shouted back, firing another shot that went wild. "Was it reasonable when you sent me to prison, when you took 2 years of my life?" "You stole my horse," Jackson replied calmly, trying to locate Pete's position through a crack in the barn wall. "You brought that on yourself." Inside the house, Sophia heard the shots and froze in fear. Through the kitchen window, she could see a man with a rifle moving toward the barn, where she knew Jackson was working. Without thinking, she grabbed her husband's spare revolver from the drawer where he kept it, checked that it was loaded as he had taught her, and hurried to the back door. Outside, she moved carefully along the side of the house, staying in the shadows. Her advanced pregnancy made movement awkward, but determination drove her forward. "Pete," she heard Jackson call from the barn, his voice steady. "Put down the gun. I don't want to hurt you. Just leave my property and we'll forget this happened." "Like hell we will," Pete shouted back. "I'm not leaving until you're dead, Abernathy." As Pete raised his rifle toward the barn again, Sophia stepped into view, the revolver held firmly in both hands. "Stop right there," she commanded, her voice stronger than she felt. Pete whirled, momentarily startled by the pregnant woman aiming a gun at him. Then he laughed. Well, Abernathy's little wife. Heard he'd gotten himself hitched. "Put down that gun before you hurt yourself, sweetheart." "I'm not your sweetheart," Sophia replied coldly. "And I know how to use this. My husband taught me. Now drop your rifle and leave our property." Pete's expression darkened. "Your husband ruined my life. Think I'll return the favor." He began to turn his rifle toward her. The barn door burst open as Jackson charged out, shouting, "Sophia, get down!" Everything happened at once. Pete swung his rifle fully toward Sophia. Jackson lunged forward, putting himself between Pete and his wife. The sound of 2 shots exploded in the yard. Sophia screamed as Jackson stumbled backward into her arms, his shirt blooming red with blood. Pete stood frozen for a moment, a look of surprise on his face, before crumpling to the ground, shot by one of Jackson's ranch hands who had emerged from the side of the barn. "Jackson!" Sophia cried, lowering him gently to the ground. No, please." His blue eyes found hers, pain clouding them. "Are you hurt?" he gasped. "No, I'm fine, but you're bleeding," she sobbed, pressing her hands against the wound in his chest. "Someone ride for the doctor," she shouted to the ranch hands who were gathering around them. "Already sent Thomas," one of them replied, kneeling to help. "Let's get him inside." They carried Jackson into the house, laying him on the bed he shared with Sophia. His breathing was labored, blood soaking through the makeshift bandage they had applied. "Sophia," he whispered, reaching for her hand. "Listen to me. If I don't you dare," she interrupted fiercely. "Don't you dare say goodbye to me, Jackson Abernathy. You're gonna be fine. The doctor is coming." But they both knew the truth. The wound was too severe, the blood loss too great, and the doctor too far away. "I love you," he said, his voice growing weaker. "Never thought I'd have this you, our child. You made me believe I could be more than my past." Tears streamed down Sophia's face as she held his hand. "You are more, so much more. I love you, Jackson. Please, stay with me." He tried to smile, his face pale. "Take care of our baby. Tell them about us, how we found each other." "You can tell them yourself," she insisted. But her voice broke on the words. Jackson's eyes began to lose focus. "You were the best thing that ever happened to me." With those words, Jackson Abernathy drew his last breath, dying as he had lived protecting what he loved. Word of Jackson's death spread quickly through Cottonwood Springs. The circumstances how he had died, saving his pregnant wife from a vengeful ex-employee, transformed the town's perception of him overnight. The harsh cowboy they had judged so harshly was suddenly revealed as a hero. The funeral was held 3 days later in the same church where they had married less than a year before. This time, the building was packed beyond capacity, with people standing along the walls and outside the doors. Ranchers who had barely spoken to Jackson in life came to pay their respects, hats in hands, solemn-faced and regretful. Sophia sat in the front pew, her black mourning dress stretched over her belly, her face pale but composed. She listened as person after person stood to speak about Jackson, some offering genuine memories of kindnesses he had done quietly, others clearly trying to rewrite their own histories with him. When it was her turn to speak, Sophia rose slowly, one hand supporting her back, and faced the congregation. "My husband was not an easy man to know," she began, her voice clear in the hushed church. "He built walls around himself because life had taught him that was safer. Many of you saw only those walls, not the man behind them. Some of you laughed when I married him, thinking I was making a terrible mistake. Several people shifted uncomfortably in their seats. You were wrong," Sophia continued. "Jackson Abernathy was the best man I have ever known. He was honest, honorable, fiercely protective of those under his care. He never sought approval or recognition for his good deeds, like when he gave half our winter hay to the tailors, or when he paid for little Emma Wilson's medicine when her father couldn't afford it. This revelation caused several surprised murmurs. He taught me to ride properly and to shoot straight. He learned to read because he wanted to share my love of books. He carved beautiful things with his hands and treated animals with gentleness. Her voice wavered slightly. He loved me, not just with words, but with actions every day. And he died saving my life and the life of our unborn child. Sophia looked around the church, meeting the eyes of those who had been quickest to judge. You may weep for him now, but I hope you also learn from him. Learn not to judge so quickly. Learn to look deeper than reputation and rumor. Learn that sometimes the harshest exterior protects the kindest heart. There wasn't a dry eye in the church when she finished. As they lowered Jackson's coffin into the ground, the same townspeople who had once whispered behind his back now stood with heads bowed in genuine respect and regret. Mayor Thompson approached Sophia after the service, hat in hand. "Mrs. Abernathy," he said, his voice subdued. "On behalf of the town council, I want to express our deepest condolences. If there's anything you need, anything at all, please don't hesitate to ask." "Thank you, Mayor," Sophia replied evenly. "What I need is for people to remember my husband as he truly was, not as you all assumed him to be." "We will," the mayor promised, looking genuinely remorseful. "We were wrong about him, about both of you." In the weeks that followed, Sophia experienced the town's change of heart firsthand. Women who had once avoided her now brought food and offered help with preparations for the baby. Men from neighboring ranches came to assist Jackson's hands with cattle management and repairs around the property. Letters arrived from people Jackson had helped quietly over the years, sharing stories Sophia herself hadn't known. Through her grief, these gestures provided some comfort. Jackson's ranch hands, to a man, pledged to stay on and keep the operation running as he would have wanted. Thomas, the oldest hand who had worked for Jackson since the beginning, became Sophia's right hand in managing the business aspects. "Mr. Abernathy told me once," Thomas confided to her, "that meeting you was like seeing the sun after years of darkness. Said he didn't deserve you, but he'd spend every day trying to." These words both broke Sophia's heart and helped heal it. In late April, as wildflowers began to carpet the hills around the ranch, Sophia went into labor. Dr. Miller came quickly this time, along with 3 women from town who had experience with childbirth. After several hours of labor, Sophia delivered a healthy baby boy with a shock of dark hair like his father's. Looking down at her son's tiny face, Sophia saw echoes of Jackson, the shape of his eyes, the strong little chin. Tears of joy and sorrow mingled as she held him close. "What will you name him?" asked Mrs. Roberts, who had once been among Jackson's harshest critics but had become one of Sophia's strongest supporters in her grief. "James Jackson Abernathy," Sophia answered without hesitation. "After his father. Little James thrived under his mother's devoted care. As he grew from newborn to infant, his personality began to emerge stubborn, like both his parents, quick to smile like his mother, but with occasional moments of intense concentration that reminded everyone of Jackson." Sophia ran the ranch with the help of Thomas and the other loyal hands. She made decisions as she believed Jackson would have, maintaining his high standards and fair practices. The first year was hard grief and new motherhood and business ownership, making for an exhausting combination, but she persevered. On the first anniversary of Jackson's death, Sophia took little James to the cemetery. The headstone was simple but dignified, exactly as Jackson would have wanted. She sat on the grass beside it, setting James down on a blanket where he could play with a wooden toy horse one of the hands had carved for him. "He looks like you," she told the headstone, her voice soft in the spring air. "Acts like you, sometimes too. So serious when he's figuring something out. I'm teaching him about the ranch already. He loves the horses." A gentle breeze stirred the wildflowers she had placed on the grave. "The ranch is doing well. That new breeding stock you bought last year is producing fine calves. Thomas says we'll have the best herd in the county in a few years if we keep on this way." She paused, watching her son grab at a butterfly that had landed near him. "The town's different now. They remember you properly. Mayor Thompson even proposed naming the new bridge after you, the Jackson Abernathy Memorial Bridge. She smiled wryly. I told him you'd probably have hated that, but I accepted anyway. I want James to grow up seeing his father's name respected. James babbled happily, reaching for her. Sophia picked him up, holding him close. I miss you every day, she continued, her voice catching. But I see you in him, in the ranch, in everything around us that you built and loved. I'm making sure he knows who his father was, not the man people thought you were, but the man I knew. The man who read by firelight and carved hummingbirds and died protecting his family. As the years passed, Sophia raised her son with stories of his father's courage and kindness. She ran the ranch successfully, eventually becoming one of the most respected ranchers in the county. Little James grew into a boy who combined his mother's warmth with his father's strength of character. When James was 5, Sophia received a marriage proposal from a kind widower in town. She declined gently, explaining that while she valued his friendship, her heart still belonged to Jackson. She never remarried, though she built meaningful friendships and remained an integral part of the community. The Abernathy Ranch prospered under Sophia's guidance. By the time James was ready to take over at 18, it had doubled in size and reputation. Like his father, James was a natural with horses and cattle. Like his mother, he had a head for business and an appreciation for literature. On James's 18th birthday, Sophia gave him the wooden hummingbird Jackson had carved for her so long ago. Your father made this, she explained, placing it in his palm. He had hands that could break a wild horse or carve something so delicate you'd think a breath would shatter it. That was his true nature, strength and gentleness together. James ran his finger over the tiny wings, just as Sophia had done the night Jackson gave it to her. Do you think he would be proud of me? He asked. Without question, Sophia assured him, touching his cheek. He would be so proud of the man you've become. That night, after James had gone to celebrate with friends, Sophia sat alone by the fireplace, the same fireplace where she and Jackson had shared their first tentative steps toward love. She opened her journal, where she still wrote to Jackson occasionally, keeping him updated on their life together. Our son is a man now, she wrote. He has your courage and your sense of justice. Yesterday, I overheard him defending a new ranch hand who others were mocking for his stutter. Judge people by their actions, not your assumptions, he told them. I couldn't help but smile. They were your words, spoken in his voice. She paused, the firelight flickering over the page. The town still remembers you as their hero. What they don't understand is that you were always a hero, not because of how you died, but because of how you lived, how you loved, how you tried every day to be better than your past. Sophia closed the journal and looked into the flames. After all these years, she could still feel Jackson's presence in the house he had built, in the son they had created, in the life she had forged from his legacy. I still love you, Jackson Abernathy, she whispered to the empty room. I always will. And somewhere, perhaps only in her heart, she felt his response, the gentle touch of the man who had come to embody not harshness, but courage and sacrifice in the eyes of all who knew his story. The man who had taught her that sometimes the most profound love grows in the most unexpected places. The town that had once laughed at their union now pointed to the Abernathy family as an example of dignity, perseverance, and true love's transformative power. Their story became local legend, how a harsh cowboy and a brave woman had found in each other not just partnership, but redemption and a love worth dying for. And in that legend, there was truth enough for Sophia, for she had loved and been loved completely. In the end, that was all that mattered.